Okay, so here we go. We are here still with my good friend, with my best friend, Karl, Amrita Simha. And we already recorded one discussion for an hour about merit or the lack of it, and dharma in the West. And now we are continuing with Lightbody. Lightbody, rainbow body, also known as immortality, also known through Jesus' example, through his resurrection. So we're talking about our innate potential that all human beings have. You know, Buddhism teaches that all beings have Buddha nature. So it is inside us somehow, somewhere. And listeners, viewers of this podcast, if you have listened the previous episodes, we have discussed about Buddha nature a lot, about mechanics of it, ins and outs of it, and techniques leading to recognition of it, practices leading to stabilizing it, establishing it in our body-mind, in our lived daily life. And this is a continuation of those episodes, taking it one step further to a point where there's no further to go. So light body or rainbow body or immortality, as it is known, is the second and last stage of full enlightenment. Maybe as an introduction, viewers, listeners, you may or may not, but it would be probably good to listen to the previous episodes and especially the Mahasiddha Interviews that have been published since late 2022. These interviews have been done by Chris, who is one of our wonderful Sangha members. So he's interviewed members of our community, members of Amrita Mandala Sangha, who have attained emptiness, attained wisdom stage, which is the first stage of full enlightenment. So the way how it works, the way how our system works, is that there are two different modalities, or two different parts to full enlightenment. And the first part is wisdom emptiness. The term emptiness comes from Buddha Dharma, from Buddhism, and you could use synonyms for that term, wisdom. If you really stretch it, you might use selflessness, but selflessness, it's to be exact, it comes from the classic vehicle of Buddhism, not the greater vehicle, Mahayana. But if you really stretch it, you could speak about emptiness, selflessness, wisdom. And in my little book that I'm about to finish on this topic, I've called it Wisdom as Basis. Wisdom as Basis. So if you happen to find this discussion we're about to have with Simha and have no idea about these terms or what I've just said, you really should go back to listening to previous episodes, and I would recommend you to read the 3 books that we have available on Amrita Mandala website: Awake, What's Next, and Buddhas Among Us. That explains all this, explains wisdom as basis from one step to the next through the whole wisdom side of enlightenment. So it's been there explained in detail, everything laid out, and even most of the practices have been openly given in those books. So we're going to talk about the subtle body, how our physical body, in dharma, in yoga, in the world of internal cultivation, what is often discussed is body and the mind. And you could roughly say that wisdom realization, or the first stage of Buddhahood, is about the mind. It's about seeing that there is no self or me, there is no self-entity anywhere in the mind. Mind that thinks, mind that feels, mind that plans, remembers, dreams, is in a foggy state. There is no self there. This is the so-called twofold emptiness discussed in Buddhism. So if we think of the word mind, it is and say that dharma practice and meditation is about the mind. Sure, it is about the mind, which is not the physical body, it is something else. But just to use the word mind, the term mind, is an oversimplification. You won't really get that far if you don't know more than that. So here we come to the very important point that the view or the theory, the theoretical understanding of the practice is really important. Because, if you do and commit yourself to some practice or even a method, but you don't really exactly understand what you're doing, then you can spend your life and lifetimes doing those practices that have little or no relevance at all to these attainments. And that's of course a pity, But this is true to everything, isn't it? That it's true to any field, anything from electric engineering to arts, to sports, to anything. Like, you need to know, if you want to become a master of something, if you really want to learn as art or a skill in a way that you can say that, I know this art, I know how to fix car engines, I know how to run a mile in a certain time frame. I don't know what's the time for mile runners, but my point is that if you know nothing about the use of the body, use of breathing, the relationship of rest and nutrition to your mile running, you probably won't be able to run a mile, in a good time, not to even mention a championship time. And it's exactly the same thing with dharma, that it is of course tricky that the mind is abstract. I can touch my body like this, and it's very concrete. I can squeeze it, I can feel the texture of it, I can count the fingers, I can feel the skin, but I can't do the same with my mind. I can't instantly do it. So, this makes it a bit more challenging, and also makes so many more pitfalls, potholes to the path of dharma, because again, if we don't know exactly what we are looking for and what we are supposed to work with in order for us to get to intermediate stages of wisdom practice or Lightbody practice, then we won't get there. It is really that simple. This rule applies to any art or skill and also dharma. So in Amrita Mandala we practice the so-called pragmatic dharma, which means that we are not afraid to speak openly and deconstruct and study the dharma from the inside, not from outside, like studying the dharma from books and scriptures, but really study the way our psyche, how the mind is constructed, and then openly speak about what are the experiences, what is awakening, what is Buddhahood, full enlightenment, and now what is light body. So this is simply our way of practicing the dharma and bringing the dharma out into the world as our act of compassion, so that others, those who are ready and those who want, can use what we have to share. So assuming that listeners and viewers have a good understanding of emptiness, good understanding of the 13 Bhumi Model, and good understanding of the subtle body that has been discussed in the books that I mentioned and in the previous podcast episodes, let's start from what happens after realizing emptiness, after establishing wisdom as basis. So maybe I should say something. Is there something you would like to add, Karl?
No, I can't think of any.
How long is it since you perfected 10 Bhumis?
Well, it was February last year, so 1 year, 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah, almost to the day. Yeah.
13, 14 months.
Yeah, 14.
In my case, it's 2 years and a month. So 25 months. What happened to me after a month and a half, about, I perfected my 10th on my 42nd birthday, on the morning of my 42nd birthday. And I had actually done a divination 2-3 years before, and then a couple of times during, and I always got the same date. So I did a divination and it happened on my 42nd birthday. But about a month and a half or 2 months later, this stage, emptiness stage, perfection of 10 bhumis has been really in detail and widely discussed in previous episodes of this podcast. So we're not gonna cover that terrain here again. But just to briefly describe how I felt was that finally my mind was clear and stayed clear. Regardless if I had as a teacher of this community, I'm kind of in a very windy position. So, people bring their problems to me and I have to deal with these problems. I have to give advice, but sometimes people also bring me difficulties, which this ties to the discussion that we just had about merit or lack of merit, lack of readiness. But from my professional position, it's pretty windy. So and also my relationship has been quite difficult. So, but regardless, of these difficulties and stressful situations, after the perfection of 10th, mind remained clear. Because all thoughts, emotions, reactions in the mind are selfless, empty of self. So there is all the time, it is called wisdom prana. So wisdom energy, vital energy that is not dirtied by sense of self. It circulates in the system. It is pure prana. It is clean prana, despite of thoughts that you have. And this doesn't mean that you're peaceful all the time. You know, you can still be angry, disappointed, pissed off, frustrated. Very, very familiar experience to me, to be frustrated due to different things. But nevertheless, there is no tightness, there is no contraction, there is no that kind of existential pain, existential confusion. But then about a month and a half or 2 months after the perfection of 10th, I started noticing something. And I started noticing these echoes, these kind of like tremors, Tremor, tremor, like vibrations, echoes that seemed samsaric, that seemed self-based. And I sat down and started listening. What is this? Where is this coming? You know, we have in Amrita Mandala, we have 13 Bhumi Model that gives a clear explanation of these so-called Bhumis, which are related to certain energy centers in the body, outside the body, and in the aura. And I knew that I had perfected 10 Bhumis, and I knew that that's what emptiness realization it actually is about. But then there were these echoes that seemed like partially samsaric, and yet they weren't exactly the same, because when I had a self-based reaction before, it was kind of like I have my smartphone here, and if I had music or some voices, sounds coming from the speaker here, I would, you know, formerly my self-based functioning of the mind was like listening to the sounds from a speaker immediately next to my ear. So, you know, it was immediately in my body. But then after perfection of 10th, it felt like it was the same stuff, but it was coming as if through a long tunnel. And I was hearing the same or similar voices or sounds, but they were coming through this long 30-meter tunnel. So this like a echoes, you know, if you listen to music through a tunnel, you know, if it gets really blurry, at first you might not even recognize your favorite tune. So that's a perfect analogy that, you know, I started listening, what is this? And where is it coming from? And it wasn't coming from the subtle body that the 13 Bhumi model discusses. It wasn't coming from the chakra system inside the body or in the aura. It wasn't coming from there, so it was coming from somewhere else. So I started scratching my head. Where is it coming? You know, how is this possible? Where is it coming? And also what I had, throughout my years of teaching, I've openly spoke about my trauma, my developmental trauma that started early on in my life as a child. And I still had that social anxiety, which is the main form that my trauma expresses itself. So I had those two echoes of the former samsaric mind, as well as the trauma. coming up mainly in social situations. So I sat down and I spent quite a bit of time figuring it out. And then I finally figured out that there's a different subtle body there. It's not in the nadis and chakras that is discussed in 13 Bhumi Model, but it's coming from meridians, or what is popularly known as meridians in traditional Chinese medicine, some internal martial arts, Shiatsu, that I used to study before that. It was coming from the meridian system or meridian field. And I learned, and due to lots of blessings and help from my gurus, I was able to work out and figure out that what the meridian field and the meridian system is, because what I had learned years ago, 20 years ago, when I studied Shiatsu, which is like a Japanese meridian massage based on traditional Chinese medicine, they teach a very simple system of meridians. There's only like 20 meridians, 20 channels going through the body related to the internal organs and their functions. So for example, in acupuncture or shiatsu, you might apply pressure on certain points in the meridians or put needles in there, and they would then affect the energy in the meridians to then have an effect on, let's say, heart organ or liver or spleen or stomach or whatever. But I had to learn and I had to figure out that is a simplified way of looking at the meridians, and actually the meridian field covers the whole body. The insides of the physical body. It's like a texture or a, how do you say, like a carpet or a fabric that covers the whole physical system. Not only some meridians running here and another there, and not like that. It's like a I often think of grass. When you have a grass field, you see this mat, this fabric, this carpet, and it's a thick carpet like this. So meridian field is a bit like that. It's a fabric covering all the insides of the physical body and reaching a little bit outside the skin, all around the body. So when I discovered that, when I found my own meridian field, it was like, now I finally found where my trauma is. You know, I have this trauma knot in my tailbone. Most of it is gone now, but for years when I had been practicing and meditating, I felt this stubborn burn-like sensation in my tailbone that was 95% unaffected by the Buddhist tantric practices that I had done. Mostly unaffected. So, and then, you know, I feel really fortunate to have the karmic connection with not only great Buddhist masters like Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal, who are behind me on my altar, but also have karmic connections with masters from the Hindu tradition, such as Babaji, Mataji, Thirumular from southern India, and also Agastya. Agastya, who is like a grandfather of the whole Hindu tradition. Not only Shaiva tradition, but Shaiva, Shakta, and Vaishnava tradition. Agastya is venerated in all three. So I haven't really during the last 8 years, when I've been focusing on figuring out Buddhist Tantra and the subtle body and deity practices and so on, and how it can affect, how it works through the 13 Bhumi Model, nadis and chakras, I haven't really taught or practiced myself Hindu tantric practices, but I used to teach Hindu Tantra before 2014 for a number of years. And I used to practice it a lot, and I used to practice Guru Yoga a lot with Hindu Mahasiddhas, Hindu gurus. When was this? Now it's early April 2023, so it was around last summer when I started, after a lot of frustration and a lot of hard work on the meditation cushion, a lot of contemplation. Little by little it started to make sense to me. Where are these former echoes of samsaric mind coming from? Where is my trauma stored? And what are the components, main elements of the whole healing of trauma subject and light body subject? So little by little started making sense to me, and I really can't emphasize enough the importance and the guidance I received from my masters, Babaji and Agastya mostly. Without them, just like I wouldn't have been able to sort out 13 Bhumi Model, the whole wisdom side of realization with the help of my Buddhist gurus, namely Guru Rinpoche, Yeshe Tsogyal, Machi Glabdron. Without my Hindu masters, I wouldn't have been able to figure out the Meridian Field and healing of trauma and light body that is connected to that. So, I'm forever grateful for what they have shown me and given me, and I'm happily passing it on to others who have similar issues with trauma and who want to reach light body in this life. Which is, by the way, attaining Buddhahood in this life is the whole idea or purpose of Yoga Tantra. So it is the same on the Buddhist side of Dharma and Hindu side of Dharma. Speaking of Buddhist and Hindu Dharma, I've over the years, every now and then I've explained and discussed how the two have different tone, have different energetic feel to them. And the reason for that, the main reason is that Buddhism is focused on, it's kind of built, mainly focused on reaching wisdom realization. And it doesn't mean that it's only about wisdom or pragya, jnana. It's not only about knowledge, wisdom, but it has an element of compassion in there. So compassion is part of Buddhist Dharma, Mahayana teaching, but it is used as the way how I understand it, the way how I see it, it's used kind of like as a catalyzer to bring about wisdom realization. But in my experience and in my understanding, the whole energetical design, the energetical alignment of Buddhist prayers, of Buddhist tantric deities, and of course embodied by Buddhist gurus, Buddhist Mahasiddhas, it's kind of engined towards wisdom realization. That's the main goal, and it's an interesting and a necessary design, because on the Hindu side of things, that has been around for much longer than Buddhism has, it is a bit like a hodgepodge, because there is no, like if you look at Hindu teachings nowadays, because there is no clear separation for wisdom or jnana, knowledge and their practices, and then Lightbody and their practices, it becomes kind of hodgepodge. And I've said this many times to my students that if you start practicing guru yoga with some Hindu guru, or doing deity yoga with received through empowerment, deity yoga with Hindu deities, you will probably have gross bliss, drunkening bliss. You feel like, oh wow, this feels so good. As if you had drunken alcohol. And the reason why that happens, I spent a lot of time in those gross blisses myself back in the day. And it's a very easy place to get stuck to. So I think that the reason why Buddhism was brought out to humanity is to fix that problem. Emphasize knowledge, wisdom, so that it makes your mind bright. And when your mind is bright, despite of circumstances, then if you look back into the way how bliss or love, ananda, is cultivated in classical Tantra from Hinduism, then it makes sense. And only then it makes sense. If your mind is not clear, if it doesn't rest in wisdom emptiness, you will get stuck in blissful samadhis, blissful states that are wonderful. It's like taking a holiday, but they are not the basic state. That is not the subtlest type of bliss. That is not sahaja. That is not Sahajananda. Sahaja means natural or spontaneous. So I remember some Buddhist tantric masters speaking about different blisses. So there are roughly four or five different ones. And the most subtle is Sahajananda. Sahaja Ananda. Spontaneous bliss, natural bliss. And that is the bliss of the basic state. And interestingly, if you compare the blissfulness of Guru Padmasambhava or Yeshe Chogyal or any other Buddhist guru, you will find that there is blissfulness there. It's not only clear, there is blissful energy there. But that blissfulness is different. I would say that it is not only different, but it is less than with Hindu masters. So I was speaking about how Hinduism and Hindu Tantra is designed and how Buddhist Tantra is designed. So what I have experienced and what I've seen with practitioners of Hindu yoga, both in India as well as in West, is that over 99% of practitioners of Hinduism, they get stuck with these grosser blisses and never find sahaja, never find the basic state. But having said that, there are Mahasiddhas in Hinduism. To this day, there are Mahasiddhas in Hinduism. I've openly spoken about hugging Saint Amma, Srimata Amritananda Devi, who is very dear and beloved to me. I've had the fortune to meet her first time 20 years ago. I've spent time in her ashram, and I've seen her in Finland, and I've seen her in different places in Europe. And I've had the opportunity to be in her presence, to receive her darshan, through hug. I've been fortunate to receive a dharma name from her and also ask questions from her through a translator. So, she has been a wonderful support for my study in all these years of figuring out how this all works, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that despite of this kind of inclarity in Hindu Yoga Tantra, there are Hindu Mahasiddhas. Some Buddhists are quite arrogant and say that without the exact Buddhist method, you cannot become a fully enlightened being or a Mahasiddha. But that is not strictly the case, even if most Hindu meditators, in my observation, get stuck with gross blisses. Is this turning into a monologue?
Somewhat of a monologue. But there are a few points that I have. There's just too many of them. I'm kind of like I might not remember everything.
Say something.
Yeah, no. Well, I can talk a little bit about my own experience of what you just talked about. The whole process of discovering the territory of
Sure.
Lightbody. And so I guess, well, roughly a year, a little bit less than a year after yourself, I had the same kind of like final cessation of the, or like what we call dropping off of the whole selfing mechanism of that subtle body that you have talked about of nadis and chakras. And the way that I experienced it was that it was exactly like something just dropped off, like some kind of subtle structure that had been there, kind of hijacking all thoughts, or like adding something to all thoughts, all emotions, adding something to the like subtle mind states and the whole idea of myself and like everything experienced, all phenomena, that kind of subtle structure just fell off. And it wasn't like a whoa kind
Yeah.
of very, very subtle and on a personal level, just like you mentioned, not much change in terms of, the actual thoughts I was having or the emotions I was having or even the behaviors that, in everyday life that, didn't change so that it might not have been visible on the outside to anybody around me that there had been this shift. Whereas from my perspective, it was the biggest shift since initial like since entering the path in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I also then fairly quickly realized that there's something left, and the way that I have I can relate to your description of of these echoes of like something's there, but it's clearly different. But the way that I would describe my own experiences is that uh, these obviously kind of self-based thoughts, no, thoughts, emotions in the physical body appeared, but they didn't have that same structure.
Yeah.
So it's still as uncomfortable, but they just kind of didn't have that structure. So they weren't solid in the same sense that they had been before. And another way that I viewed it, like speaking of this mind versus body thing, is that because I think it was last summer I went to this wedding, and I had the experience of it was very clear that mind is just completely open, no contraction, not even like possible. It's not impossible to contract on the level of the mind. But the physical body was just a bundle of social anxiety, and it just felt like wearing a straitjacket on the physical body. But then the mind is free, and it's kind of like this eerie contrast between the two, making one so much more aware of what is going on the physical level. And I couldn't, I couldn't just decide on dropping it. I was watching other people dance, and I was thinking, yeah, it looks fun, but I just completely unable to let go of that physical tension.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense for a long time until so you said with the help of your gurus, you made sense of it, and with the help of you as my guru, it kind of clicked when this meridian system was expounded on, was illuminated through practice. So when our view included that there is this other system, it just clicked. And it's not just that it made sense what I was experiencing, but it also, and this is very important, clicked when, in the sense that I was actually able to do something about it. Like I was able to understand it, so that to actually to deal with it, to access it on a different level. So an example of that is, I've received from you teachings that specifically relate to this, like Lightbody, prior to that
Yes.
meridian body theory falling in place, but they just didn't work as well as, like, they worked, there was effect, of course, but it just I just couldn't make sense of how it worked.
Yeah.
And then when making a experiential connection to this field that we then call the meridian system, those very same practices started working exactly as they should. And that's,
Right.
just to illuminate that power of, or the importance of view here.
Yeah.
And so, yes, so when that fell in place, the whole practice, suddenly there was just this plug being pulled where things started flowing and working as they should. Yeah, so that's like my own experience of these two, these two different systems here.
Something that I could add to that, I'm writing this book about, it's going to be a small book, but it's a book really anyway, about Lightbody. And when I've been writing that book, I've been contemplating, we have the subtle body or the mind that is made of nadis and chakras, meaning channels and energy centers. And then there is the other subtle body called meridians, that is made of meridians, like I just described and defined it. And also meridian system, it's made of, like I used that analogy of a mat of grass, like a fabric of grass. It is actually made of tubes, like lines. They are thicker, much thicker than nadis, but kind of elastic, rubbery, warm lines all over the physical body. And what is really interesting that you were saying that you had received Hindu practices from me before that automatically are more connected with the meridian field than Buddhist practices are. As I was writing my book, I started to think that, in Zen Buddhism that I used to practice, there's a lot of embodied sitting. So you just sit and you're aware of your body, mindful of the sensations in the body, or you're following the breath in the lower belly, in the gut, often packing prana, packing chi there, which I think is a misinterpretation, misunderstanding what the Dantien or Tanden, the center in the gut, is about. But nevertheless, you're working in Zen Buddhism, you're working a lot with your body. And I remember back in the day in the monastery and in different centers where I went to train and do retreats in, everybody had the same experiences. When I talked with people about the heat in the body, sometimes even working, like the body becoming so warm that the body sweats a little bit, and it became really handy in the winter in Japan because there was no heating in the temple, so you had to heat yourself. So that was handy. But anyway, I realized that with embodied sitting, if you're saying that this practice is about awakening and becoming a Buddha, you're actually cultivating the wrong field. You're cultivating the wrong subtle body, because you won't have awakening experiences or Bhumi openings, as they are called in Amrita Mandala. You won't have them if you cultivate the Meridian Field.
Unless accidentally.
Well,
You can say that, but I understand, it's not it doesn't take away anything from the point.
yeah, it didn't happen to me, and I know a
Yeah.
bunch of people who have done embodied sitting. Like I was invited to become a new teacher of this UK Ireland-based Buddhist group. When was this? 6 years ago, about 6 years ago, and everybody had been doing embodied sitting there, working with their body in different ways, believing that they're working with the mind, believing that they will have awakening experience, but they didn't. In a group of 35 Sangha members, there was only 2 people who had had awakening experiences. And the other person of the 2 was a regular visitor of different dharma groups and different presentations, and that's where he had his awakening. So there was only one person who had had awakening out of 35 by doing embodied sitting. So that is a bit, there's much more to say about this, but there is a lot of confusion if we look at cultivating the wrong field and believing that it's awakening or awakening comes through it. This is quite common misconception in the world of Qigong. Like Qigong means Chinese yogic practices. So I've often heard, I've joined so many Qigong and in Chinese internal martial arts teachings in different styles, in different lineages over the years, that I've heard it a number of times being said that, this will give you health, this will give you strength, and this will even make you awakened or enlightened, whichever term was used. But it doesn't, you know. Of course, it has become much clearer to me when I've learned to read Bhumis, learn to apply the 13 Bhumi model and actually see from people what they have reaped through their practice or not. And what is really common, just a brief comment, is that people who do embodied practice, whether in sitting or standing or Tai Chi or, they have really radiant, beautiful skin. They usually don't have moles on the body or not that many moles, and skin is just really healthy and radiant. But they still might be unawakened. So completely in dualistic positioning with the habitual thinking that is built on the sense of me or self. Yeah.
This is my experience as well, and I mentioned it to you yesterday in relation to standing meditation, because Standing meditation is something that, well, I
Mm.
learned it originally from you when I lived in Tammisaari. I think it was 2016.
Mm.
Oh, sorry. And it's one of those practices that it's been in the back of my mind, so I didn't continue practicing it regularly from the beginning, but it's been in the back of my mind, and I picked it up from time to time, knowing that at one point, or well, knowing, having this hunch that, there is something there. It's just not the main practice right now. I was putting um
Yeah.
my like prioritizing other practices, like rainbow body yoga, emptiness practices. And anyways, I picked it up a few days ago, like maybe a week, maybe last Friday, because as I like you published a written conversation that we had about some principles of Amrita asana yoga, where like I was describing some discoveries that I did, and that I first kind of realized when picking up spontaneously standing practices, that
Mm.
there you can do these kinds of very subtle, like intention based changes, or I don't know how to describe it, but these working with these very subtle principles that aren't physical but on a mental level, and it affects the posture, it affects the energetic state of the body.
Just to interrupt you briefly, it is application of intention or
Yeah,
application of intent that in Chinese internal arts is known as Y-I-E, intention. Yeah, applying
yeah,
intent into the body, which is like I often like to translate it into English as physicalized concentration.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a very good one, because how it felt and how it feels like is just that you're kind of feeling like there's this kind of subtle, you could call it like a pressure that is
yeah,
kind of filling the whole frame of the body. So it's kind of like concentration and physical concentration.
yeah.
Um, and after I wrote that, it kind of clicked that okay, maybe it's time to check out standing practice again. Uh, and I picked it up on Friday, and it's just kind of like wow, is my experience with it has been so far that it very much fits at the moment with my practice. And uh, I'm not sure if this directly translates to what we were talking about it, but I think I want to mention it anyways. That oh, what was my point? Yeah, so what seems to be happening when you stand still? So this is my own understanding after a week, so still a beginner in this
Mm.
practice, is that uh, your body, like the physical sensations, just impose themselves on you in a way. Like they're so obvious. It's so obviously physical, the practice, that you kind of can't get away from it. And so the only way to stand and be comfortable is to keep relaxing, and feeling into that field of the body that is presenting itself very like in your face. And so, like, what I'm trying to say is that here is that it kind of forces the body to open up this meridian system. Like,
Yeah.
uh, at least, like from my experience, having then deconstructed the whole self-based mind. So,
Yes.
and also being in a like a reasonable physical shape. Like it's not a problem. Like I'm not starting to shake immediately like I did when I first picked it up many years ago. So I've done other physical practices in the meantime that have prepared me So that should just be mentioned. But where I'm at is just kind of instantly falling into this physical standing, where the physicality of it is enough in itself.
Yeah,
And all the small movements, so it's like standing like a pole is the direct translation of, is it Jean, um, Zhang, something like that.
that's a Cantonese way of saying it. Jam Jong,
Yeah, yeah. I'm neither Cantonese nor Mandarin.
Mandarin.
uh, so so it like, which directly translate as standing like a pole, but you're not standing still for a second. Like there is that stillness to it. There is a
Yeah.
static posture, but you're constantly on like micro, it's like a micro dance, and it becomes what is taking up your level of awareness, which that's what's going on, just dropping into all the subtle intelligence of the body, basically. And
Mm.
from there opens very easily these like very, very pleasurable states, like jhana states, you like similar states where you just feel this warmth of these currents going through the body. So different levels of it, of course, but like ultimately you just merge completely with the surroundings. So there is no then separation on the physical level anymore.
Mm.
So just this spontaneously arising life force that is your own like physical self.
So there was quite a lot there what you just said. Um, as we were having a brief chat yesterday about standing practice, and you were describing briefly what you just described, I thought that, you know, the duality in the mind is removed through wisdom practice, through knowledge, jnana, but similarly physically there is separation, duality. And this has been also my experience that, you know, even if you have wisdom of the mind, emptiness established, like you described in your wedding experience, you know, the body is still waiting to be integrated and incorporated with the mind of enlightenment, with basic awareness. Something that I would like to add a comment about Amrita Asana Yoga. Like I wrote that bit in Facebook about what Amrita Asana Yoga is. And I will explain this to our listeners and viewers. So, Amrita means deathless. Asana is a Sanskrit word, both are Sanskrit. And asana means posture. So, it's a yoga posture practice. But because I have a long history with Chinese internal martial arts and Chinese yoga, different types of Qigong, as well as Indian asana yoga. You know, it took me many years to do this, but I wanted to put the key principles together and put it together to then have spiritual or tantric practice in the same practice, awareness practice, you know, always prioritizing that, and then have energetic practice, including E, physicalized intention. E, that whole concept is completely unknown in Indian yogas and Tibetan yogas. It has become like a basic thing in Chinese practices and Japanese practices, but from Tibet and India they don't know what it is. So really making intention, concentration physical, physicalized concentration, like I said. So I wanted to put awareness practice through tantric mantras, prayers, and then energetic practice, including E, and physical workout. Physical workout that works on the muscles as well as stretches the body. Not only stretching the muscles, but because of E, you access, in one of the classical forms of Qigong in China is called I Jing Jing, which means tendon changing classic. You could call it like a tissue changing, tissue transformation practice. And you can find, if you go to YouTube and write I Jin Jing, Yijinjing, I Jin Jing. If you YouTube it, you can find Shaolin versions of it, different versions of it. So they are movements where you do some kind of movement and you physically stretch, but because of applying E, you're also stretching from the deep in the body. So really deep tissues are affected, not only the muscles. So, I Jing Jing, the principle of E, it's, your practice is not considered authentic Qigong if in China, if you don't have E in it. So in Amrita Asana Yoga, this is like a central principle. But we start in Amrita Asana Yoga in a kind of backwards way to getting there. And this I learned from the so-called second course of Yi Chuan. Yi Chuan is a Chinese internal martial art tradition where you stand in, pole standing in different positions, and it's Yi Chuan, which means literally intention fist. And there is the one lineage called second course Yi Chuan by Master Han Jingyu, where you start working with the body and the muscles by tensing, actually physically tensing like this. And you tense all muscles of the body, all muscles at the same time. So, you might be tensing all muscles in a very lightly or moderately or very hard, but that's what you work in the beginning. And this is what we also start doing in Amrita Asana, applying that whole body tension to different yoga postures, which is an excellent workout because of the that dynamicity of it. It just clears the mind and it makes the body feel so strong and so soft at the same time. It is like a magical formula. And on the second level of Amrita Asana that you already discovered through your about 6 months of Amrita Asana practice, there I emphasized on using E. So you're not only, tensing your muscles, but you're studying how that intention, how that physicalized contraction, how it, what that component is about. And, I have few friends who studied, I also studied second course of each one, and I knew from that training that it is incredibly effective. And, in more traditional methods of each one, you start with relaxed standing where you don't tense the muscles, and you slowly start to learn about E, physicalized concentration, but it takes so much longer through that methodology to understand E. And also, when you stand a lot, not using your muscles, or do Qigong not using your muscles deteriorate. It is often, unfortunately, the case because of a basic misunderstanding among Qigong practitioners that they are very weak and thin. But I've often thought of, Shaolin monks, for example. They have all the principles together. They practice kung fu, they do push-ups, sit-ups, they do really strenuous exercise, and then they have E that they train in, and they have meditation. So they have all the elements already together. So it's a misunderstanding and misinterpretation in Chinese internal martial arts that E or Qi would be enough. So of course we want to be strong and healthy. And there's no way to be strong and healthy if your body and muscles are weak. So we can't skip or bypass the physical body.
Yeah,
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
I find that, so as you described, I went from practicing with the physical tension to those more subtle, like I was actually forced to practice more subtly, like the contraction, because I have a hernia that started hurting if
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah.
kind of unskillfully, so to speak, would overdo the pressure. And so I was kind of forced to experiment with more subtle ways of doing it, and kind of also channeling, how do I tense my body to avoid like exaggerating this hernia.
Mm,
And this was kind of together with that, it kind of clicked when I then stood at the airport in a static meditative standing posture. Then it kind of clicked even more that I discovered that, okay, you don't actually need physical tension in order to do this.
yeah.
But then that discovery, it doesn't leave. You don't, like, there's no way I would leave behind physical tension, and now only E is the
Mm,
like the game, the name of the game. It just like, but discovering that has a synergic effect.
yeah.
If you say that, so everything just gets better. Standing still is much better. Tensing is much better. It just kind of becomes this play with principles, and it like what has happened now is that my morning practice the past few days, so I've started, standing. I might even spin like a prayer wheel, because that spinning while standing like has an effect on the whole body, and
Mm,
then you get the mantric benefits. And then I will stand statically for a while, and then the body just knows when it's time to do some stretches, and also like very importantly in Amrita yoga is that you very quickly learn to work with, you could call it some like main lines of the body. So
yeah.
like as you teach it, um, the different postures, you kind of how do you say, like uh, tightening the bow. That's
Activating, yeah, yeah.
activating like the bow. And you can do that in all kinds of postures, and there's always this line you can find. And so once you get to that point, you can, like, it becomes very free and very spontaneous. Then coming back to just standing, which is uh, like a significantly uh, benefited by that, those breaks of applying like physical tension, and then just playing around with these. And then I might like take up a kettlebell and do the same with a kettlebell in my like hands, just because you can it becomes this very playful practice that I think like yeah, it's just it's revolutionizing my own practice these days, this.
So what you meant by the line is the better name for it is frame.
Yeah.
So you're speaking of unified body frame. In Tai Chi classics, they speak of 9 pearls, which means the joints of the body, meaning ankle joint, knee, hip, first 3, lower back, mid back, upper back, the next three, shoulder, elbow, and wrist, to come up with 9 pearls that are all connected in a string, rather than the string being cut or bent. So you have like a line that you then twist and turn, and it stays connected. It never gets cut or broken at any point. So that's like a unified body frame, and that's exactly what is built in all traditional Chinese qigongs, yogas, arts, and also in Amrita asana. There was something about standing. You know, I am not a teacher of Taoist practices. I don't belong to a lineage of any Taoist lineage, but I have meditated, practiced Guru Yoga with a number of great Taoist immortals, including the 8 main immortals. If you Google Taoist immortal, there's a Wikipedia page of 8 immortals. And I've also practiced Guru Yoga with Lao Tzu, the author of Tao Te Ching, and Lietzu, who is believed to have been Lao Tzu's one of his main students. So, just for those listeners who don't understand what I just said, or might find it strange, Guru Yoga is a term named for a practice that is that is the main practice in all authentic tantric yoga systems. Guru Yoga means that you meditate, you feel the presence of a guru, of a fully enlightened guru or fully enlightened Mahasiddha. Behind me you can see a statue of Guru Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche, and Yeshe Tsogyal. So, for example, those 2 masters are commonly meditated, practiced Guru Yoga with in Tibetan Buddhism. In Christianity, when you pray to Jesus and you feel blessings, you feel Jesus' presence, that is Guru Yoga. So, without calling it Guru Yoga, there are millions of people, millions of Christians who pray and feel Jesus' presence in their evening prayers or every now and then when going to church. That categorically is Guru Yoga. So, in my own practice, I practiced Guru Yoga for thousands and thousands of hours, feeling the presence, receiving the blessings, and studying the energy of different gurus, because it is slightly different from one guru person to another guru person. It is different from when coming from Buddhism to Hinduism. It is different from coming from Hinduism to Taoism, and so on. So there are these, what is that word? Slight differences there. And it's to me as a yogi, it has been a very rewarding and delightful study to study the energies and differences of different gurus. And similarly, like I said, I've studied the energy of immortals, Taoist immortals. And because I have studied Buddhist gurus, Hindu gurus, Taoist gurus, and Jesus extensively, when I say thousands of hours, I mean it literally. I don't mean 1,000, but I mean like several thousands of hours. So Taoist immortals have, they have their own lineage, feel of their lineage, feel of their community, just like Buddhists and Hindus do, but they have that same extremely fine energy. Extremely fine energy. anybody who listens to this, if you want to do the work and really understand what I mean by really fine energy, study the 13 Bhumi model. I've written books about it. You can find all the guided sessions to study your own Bhumis in your own system, and you can learn what I mean by this subtle energy. So I'm not making like a blank statement that, just randomly saying things. I'm actually talking about, real energies that can be experienced, studied, and analyzed with, you can make discoveries of yourself, and in this case about Taoist immortals. So the reason I'm speaking about this is because, in Amrita Mandala, a side of practice, as well as in number of other disciplines, such as Reiki healing, traditional Mikao Usui Reiki, not any New Age Reiki, but Mikao Usui, who was the Japanese founder of Reiki, his Reiki, as well as in Kriya Yoga traditions that started with Babaji in the late 1800s. So there are some traditions that have that principle, but in Amrita Mandala we also have the principle of the so-called Mahasiddha Bhumis, which means energy centers high above the head and far below the body. So, when you in a state of meditation, we have so many guided sessions of this you can find from Amrita Mandala YouTube, but I'm briefly describing this. So if you sit there in meditation and you feel your body, and then with your attention reach far down below your body, at least 5-6 meters down, you will feel that there is this shift of energy. It is as if hooking up a device, like an electrical device, into a main source of electrical power. It is like plugging into a source of very pure, completely pure and strong energy. So if you bring your attention down 5-6 meters, or attention up from the crown 5-6 meters, you end up with the same energy. And we call it Mahasiddha Bhumis, which means grounds of the greatly accomplished ones. Mahasiddha Bhumis. So I think, through my study of Guru Yoga, including with Taoist immortals, is that they knew about these centers high above and far below the body, which that in Taoist context, I could call them the fourth Dantien. Dantien, or in Japanese Tanden, it's a very distinct concept relating to the subtle body. And nowadays I wouldn't want to say traditional, because just like we have seen in Tibetan Buddhism, in Zen Buddhism, in all traditions, the teachings do not remain the same from one century or one millennia to the other. They do change, they do get altered, and sometimes even corrupted. So, if you think of some Zen presentations today, it is probably very different than 1500 years ago. If you look at Taoist presentations today, probably very different than 1000 or 2000 years ago, and so on. What I'm saying is that things change over time, and then what is spoken of as traditional might actually be like a modern alteration, or even like a modern corrupted version. And I'm trying to say this constructively to, make people think about this, because it is a fact that this happens. Similarly, like nowadays in Tibetan Buddhism, they have the preliminary practices, and many think that the standardized preliminary practices have been part of Tibetan Buddhism forever, but they have only been there for 200 years. Before that, there was no 400,000 repetitions of preliminaries. There was no such system before that. And yet, nowadays, if you start studying, practicing Tibetan Buddhism, you practice traditional way when you start preliminaries. So I think that, and based on my experience of Guru Yoga with Taoist immortals, is that they knew about the fourth Dantien, that they knew about the Mahasiddha Bhumis. And if we talk about pole standing, Chamjong, like it's called in Cantonese, in Mandarin it's something like Chan Chuan. I don't know, my Chinese, I don't have any Chinese skills. So Chan Zhuang, true, it can be done as health practice because it has a lot of effect on the physical tissues as well as the meridian field. So, you know, you clear blockages of the meridian system, and when blockages get released, you have a better flow of chi or prana, and this directly affects your physical body and physical well-being, including the organs. It is, by the way, very interesting about the whole basic idea of acupuncture, because you're using a physical needle, placing it on a point in a meridian that is non-physical. If you open up the skin, you can't find meridians or acupuncture points there, but you put a physical needle on acupuncture point or points, and it has an effect on your physical organs. That is so fascinating, which just tells that the physical body and the meridian field are like this. They are very close together. And that's why when we have trauma reactions, or that's why the trauma reactions feel so physical. Like you described that you felt like contracted in that wedding. That's why it feels so physical. Yeah. But about the fourth Dantien, so if we look at typical Taoist practice nowadays, they speak of three Dantiens. And we have these three Dantiens also in Amrita Mandala. I have called them because I didn't really know what to call them, but there is a center, about the fist-size center, in the middle of the head, inside the heart, in the middle of the chest, and inside the gut, in the middle of the belly. So these three are the traditional three Dantiens. And well, that's a whole nother discussion, what Dantiens are, what I think they are. And my view differs greatly from traditional Taoist view, because like in Zen Buddhism, you start gathering chi or prana into your lower belly, into your lower Dantien. But I think I don't think it is very useful, and my view about these Dantiens, or these areas in the subtle body that always remain pure, they are not really chakras, but they are kind of areas or locations where our basic awareness of Buddha nature always remain untangled, untarnished, and can always be discovered. Having said that, I think that the true Dantien, or these areas of, should I call them Amrita Chakras, like deathless chakras, even though they're not really chakras, but anyway, Amrita Kshetrams, like areas of deathlessness, they are not that easy to find. I just said that it's a fist-size area inside the head, heart and gut, but it's not actually that easy to find because they are areas of our basic awareness of Buddha nature. How often when somebody sits in embodied sitting recognizes Buddha nature? How often when somebody standing there might be standing for hundreds of hours over a year, standing a lot, how many times they glimpse their basic nature?
Yeah.
So I'm just making a point that even though I can describe it easily,
Yeah.
I think that also in Taoist esoteric Taoism, these have been pointed out. There has been transmissions that help the students to discover them and then to cultivate them successfully. This is also true about the way how I learned them from Vimala Mitra. Yeah, go ahead.
Here again is an example of view. Like the view is instrumental in accessing these. Like it was
Yeah,
when you pointed them out through like very simple, shamatha style, practice, just kind of resting and relaxing into these centers. Uh, I might, if the view of them as actually like deathless areas, portals into the nature of mind, into the qualities of the nature of mind. If that hadn't been pointed out, I might have been, as you say, sitting there for
yeah,
centuries. And
yeah,
then when the view is there, it makes it much easier to connect with it. You don't have to it's not hit and miss anymore.
yeah,
Uh, Uh, and this is also, like I just remembered why I started talking about this standing posture, because we were talking about these things getting muddled together,
mm,
and this was exactly like what, because I started, looking for resources online, on various Taoist practices, including or primarily standing, and yeah, as you say, they're radiant, they look very healthy, not awakened. Like that's I haven't like those I have come across so far.
yeah,
Whereas in my own case, there is that um, true spiritual awakening aspect of the practice, or well, like not working with the emptiness here anymore. But anyways, that spiritual, like there's this much deep most level of the practice because of the view, because the view isn't clouded and like
yeah. Let's continue from there, from standing practice as a truly cultivation practice, and then we can move on to the light body, because we've been talking around it, but let's take a break for 10 and then continue.
yeah.
Okay, so here we go again. So I'll explain a little bit about light body and how it comes about from my experience, from my understanding that is not yet complete, but nearing it, hopefully nearing it. So we've talked about nadis and chakras that makes its own subtle body. Then we've talked about Meridian Field that covers the whole physical body. And then we've talked about Amrita Chakras or Amrita Kshetrams or Dantiens. And we talked about 3 plus the 4th Dantien, so gut, heart and head, and then the fourth Dantien on both ends of the subtle body, high up, far below. And so if we think of nadis that are really thin tubes in the subtle body that consists the aura of a person, any person, even though the nadis are very thin, like hair width, they have two parts to it. There is the external layering and the inside of the nadi, just like you see in electrical lines. Outer layer, inner layer. Outer layer is where the dirt in the 10 bhumis are, from 1st to 10, and that's the terrain that where you transform ignorance into wisdom. That's the terrain of wisdom realization. But the insides of all those hundreds of thousands of channels that makes the aura, the insides always remain pure. And this is the reason why with practices we can switch from the samsaric state of mind, contracted state of mind, through different techniques. It doesn't necessarily take longer than a second to practice a technique. We can switch from that self-based mind to mind that is completely free and open and clear. So you switch from the outer layer of the nadis to the internal core of the nadis. And then as you keep purifying the system, the outer layer gets cleaner and cleaner in different layers or bhumis of the subtle body, and that's how you attain wisdom emptiness and establish wisdom as basis. All right. That process already probably has, so now I'm talking about Amrita Mandala method. You know, it is not necessarily the same, exactly the same way how it happens in other methods, because Amrita Mandala is so different as a method. So, you know, we don't, at least now, we don't have much preliminaries. You just dive into emptiness practice immediately through higher Yoga Tantra, Maha Yoga, Anu Yoga, and Ati Yoga from the beginning. So you don't, there is no requirement of other practices. So my point is that, you know, somebody who trains in Zen Buddhism or even Bhakti Yoga, like sings the names of Krishna, that these practices have an impact on the meridian system. If you have such background, you know, you already have purified some of the meridian system also. But meridian system, it's like a, I don't know, maybe 1,000 meridians all around and in the physical body where the traumas are stored, and that needs to be, is required to be purified for us to attain the pure body called light body, body of light, rainbow light of body, body of rainbow light. Having said that, one important element in that process is, you know, is bodhicitta, is compassion. So, you know, you won't attain wisdom if you don't have bodhicitta. If you're not doing it for the benefit of all beings and for helping all beings. And similarly, you know, even if you stood there practicing really diligently and in a committed way, you won't reveal the light body, the original natural light body, without doing it for the sake of others. So that is important. This is not like in that sense, you cannot, by following merely technical details, you can't attain it. If your heart's not in it, if your motivation is incorrect, you're doing it for selfish reasons, not going to happen. So that is definitely an important point. And in my studies, what I discovered is that, when you pray for the liberation, when you pray for the freedom of all sentient beings, that's what opens up, kind of stretches open the subtle body made of nadis. It opens up the aura. Often students say that when they generate bodhicitta through prayer, they feel like the subtle space around the body opens up, like their mind expands. But there is a different modality to bodhicitta that relates to meridians, and that is happiness, or praying for the happiness of all beings, or joyfulness. The term sukha means joyful, happy. It kind of communicates the sense of ease, being at ease. So when you start praying for happiness of all beings, for all beings to be naturally joyful, be naturally at ease, instead of praying for the liberation of them, that's what addresses the meridian system. I've seen, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, I've seen prayers for happiness. May beings be happy and have causes of happiness. May they get liberated and have causes of liberation, said like that. But I have never heard anybody explain it, that why is there happiness and why liberation, why those two are separate. On the other hand, light body is not pursued in so many lineages and traditions of meditation and contemplation anyway. But I think this is a very important point, that it's a slightly different type of bodhicitta. Freedom for the aura, for the bhumis, and then happiness, joyfulness for the meridians. That's how you get access to it. If you have that motivation, you're cultivating the right field.
And anybody can feel the difference between
Of
these
course.
in their own practice.
Yeah. May all beings be free. May all beings be free. May all beings be free. Meditate with that prayer and you will feel the opening of the nadi body, opening of the aura. May all beings be happy and joyous. May all beings be happy and joyous, happy and joyous. And the same thing happens with your meridians. I'm just very quickly describing the ins and outs. I'm not leading a session, but you can do a session on your own. So we have nadis that have outer layer, inner core, and then we have meridians. And so what happens when we purify the meridian field in the body is that nadis and meridians start connecting. The two systems start connecting, and the meridian field being it's like a component in between the nadis and the physical body. Its organs, skin, blood, anything there is the physical body. Meridians are there in between the nadis and the physical body. So once you start purifying the meridians, the more meridians get purified, it automatically connects and starts affecting the physical tissues and organs. So, as we can understand, as the listeners can imagine, when you have wisdom as basis, your mind already all the time rests in clarity, in energy of kindness and wisdom. And from there you start purifying meridians. And when you get what I'm trying to say is that it's a very different setting for meridian cultivation and purification than not having wisdom as basis. If you're in unawakened state, you have the whole self-centered samsaric engine in the background when you're trying to purify the meridians. And this can still be very effective from the perspective of bettering one's health or acquiring martial skills, be they internal martial arts or external martial arts, can still be very effective and beneficial. But without wisdom as basis, it is not, proper as a spiritual practice. And it is that spiritual perspective that is instantly perceivable if you practice Guru Yoga with Taoist immortals. It is instantly you notice that, oh, they have 10 Bhumis perfected. Their mind rests in the wisdom body. There is no question, no doubt about it. Like there is no, no confusion about that at all. So, if we discuss standing practice, pole standing, Chan Zhuang, as as a spiritual practice, these are the requirements. Or of course, you can practice standing and work with your meridians as you're working through, having awakening experiences, working your way through the bhumis. But if you're not giving any attention to that, I would say that in that case you're not following the example of Taoist immortals, and definitely not getting to the same results and fruits as Taoist immortals. I feel very deeply about this because I am not saying that somebody is doing their practice wrong if they're doing it differently. I'm just saying, speaking of my observations from my many sessions and hours of Guru Yoga with Taoist immortals, I'm simply talking about my observations. Everybody can do have their own views and opinions and do their own practices, but I think that this is the way how great masters of Taoism have practiced internal arts, not only pole standing. And there is actually an interesting reference to this from the book by Dr. Baolin Wu about the Taoist master Du Xinlin, who attained rainbow body in 1987 in Beijing. Du Xinlin was, I think he was 116 years old, like a old gentleman, sage really at that point. He has been photographed by Patrick Kelly, a renowned Tai Chi teacher. I think Patrick Kelly is Australian. But there are people who question Dr. Baolin Wu's book and whether Du Xinlin actually ever existed or not. But Patrick Kelly met him, photographed him, and he has written down the conversations he and his friend had with Du Xinlin in 1987 in Beijing. But if you look at Du Xinlin's photograph, it is like if you know about subtlest energy, if you know about what wisdom energy is, you immediately see that, oh, he's got it, and he's fully established in it. But Patrick Kelly wrote an interesting thing about Du Xinlin, who was 116, I think, years old. And he said that he practiced push hands, Tai Chi push hands with his indoor students. Push hands means that it is not really wrestling like wrestling in a Western way, but it is like touching hands where you apply pressure. You know, you're trying to push with your hands your partner. You are kind of testing how their body feels. That's a very simple way of describing it. And why would a 116-year-old Taoist master wrestle with his students? Why would he practice that in the first place? And why would he preserve his offer to practice push hands only to his disciples? This is esoteric transmission. He probably wasn't demonstrating how quickly you can punch, or how strong you can be, or how you can pin down somebody. He was doing it for transmitting, which is exactly the same that Terayama Roshi did with me back in the day. We touched hands and he demonstrated how the body feels, and he told me to push in certain places of his body, and he showed me that this is how you do it. He hadn't attained Buddhahood or Lightbody, but nevertheless that was method of his, that was his transmission of spirituality. So not for martial reasons, not for health reasons, for spiritual reasons. So I think that Du Xinlin's example, the little fragments there is known of him, because Patrick Kelly went back the next year in 1988, and he had already left his body. In Dr. Baolin Wu's book, he describes how Du Xinlin was. He said that he will take a rainbow. You can find this bit from my blog, Taoist Master Attains Rainbow Body, I think it is titled. And he was sitting in front of a large group. There was many people in that meditation hall. There were officials from the communist regime, and he disappeared in red light. And there was no trace of him. And he, before it happened, he explained that, I'm gonna take rainbow. I'm gonna rainbow now. He used the way how Baolin Wu has translated into English is that he used a rainbow as a verb. I'm gonna rainbow, So, and he even said that if my rainbowing is unsuccessful, you should completely forget my teachings, all the teachings I've ever given you. So, I have full faith in Du Xinlin as a Taoist immortal. Others can have their opinions. I saw there was people thought that such a person never existed and it was just imagination, but tune in and meditate and see if Du Xinlin, if he's a real immortal. I can say that he is. But yeah, if we think of, or to me, Taoist practice, internal martial art, I wouldn't even want to speak about martial art anymore, use the martial anymore, because to me it has nothing to do with fighting. I don't have any interest in that, but I do have a lot of interest, just like Terayama Roshi, using these ways as a way to communicate what is possible, what is available to us, and what is possible. And I've actually done this throughout the years, like demonstrating E to my meditation students just by sitting and by applying E into the group, or by grabbing hold of their hand and showing what's muscle squeeze and what's the squeeze of the E. I've done little things like this. We've done, pushing the body, working in pairs on some retreats. Yeah, that's how it's done and transmitted.
Well, I was just thinking about this, that because we have discussed previously that I remember I was visiting you, not the last time, but the time before that, and we were watching some, I think it was some Indian drummer, like master drummer, and you were contemplating this that dharma is an art that doesn't have like necessarily an outward expression in the same way that many arts do. So it's like
Right,
a basic part of life. So
right.
you can't show anybody how amazing you are at playing the drums, or it's more subtle than that. But then it clicked, or I kind of realized yesterday that these movement-based arts that are very much connected with spirituality, or are founded in spiritual practice, that they become this when everything then is unified, or when the practice is complete, it becomes like an expression, like a physical
Mm,
expression of the dharma.
mm,
uh, like you're saying, it's a way to transmit both through displaying
mm.
and through touch. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Like Hugging Saint Amma is doing that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
She's doing that. And just to make it a bit clearer, what I've contemplated, because I was trained as a musician, as a guitar player back in the day. So um, I always felt that I didn't want to be dependent on the instrument. And I don't think it crosses the mind of most musicians or artists, but I wouldn't also want to be dependent on painting or brush and paints or any instrument. I want my art form to be deeper than that. And the deeper is the whole Zen thing. You have to, if you don't have awakened mind, then it is not possible to do Zen martial arts or Zen calligraphy, Zen painting, Zen poetry, Zen anything, right? So that was that. Um, what was it that you mentioned? I already forgot where I was going to.
Well, I was talking about physical expressions
Yeah,
of
yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, definitely. Like I have no interest in learning how to practice Tai Chi, push hands to throw somebody or to pin somebody down or to nothing like that. No interest whatsoever anymore, but as a way to communicate the energy.
Yeah.
There was something I wanted to add about the subtle body. So when you purify the meridian system, it actually starts feeling like, you first feel that the meridian field is like a thick fabric, like a grass. But then at some point when you purify it, you start feeling like it becomes like there's nothing there. It feels like there's holes in it. And these holes, they connect together. So, at that point, the Dantiens or Amrita Chakras, they start connecting with the meridian field that has been purified. So they connect because that's how it naturally, spontaneously is. You're just removing the dirt and the connectedness of the subtle body appears. You're removing the obstacles just like you did with nadis, and it shows up already unified, right? So, at that point, then, like I briefly mentioned before, that my view about the Dantiens or Amrita Kshetrams is significantly different than the way how they are presented by Taoist teachers. I think there are pure areas in the subtle body, kind of like doorways or portals into the basic state. But when you have established wisdom as basis, and then you are clearing the meridians, it just becomes like first of all, it's a continuum from nadis to meridians to dantiens or Amrita Chakras. So you have a continuum through the subtle bodies that connects with the physical body. And, if we think of the samsaric mind that thinks in terms of self and other, this and that, good and bad, it is like some parts are solid while some parts are flowing. And then through emptiness realization, that whole thing is flowing. There is no longer solid, rigid parts that could cause friction. And it is the same thing with the purification of meridians, that when the original pure body, original light body starts showing up, it's a very different kind of experience than just having a samsaric meridian field that affects the physical body and often creates, trauma is such a big, I've learned so much of trauma through my meridian study, about my own trauma and the traumas of people, because the effect the trauma has on the meridians and the physical body is I've never would have thought of that. Like I have read expositions about trauma from different psychotherapists, psychology sources, but I don't think they really understand how vast the effect of traumas really is on the physical system. Creating illnesses, creating all kinds of aches and ailments that people often think that, well, that's just age. That's just this or that. In my experience, so many things that I thought was age or just random things are caused by trauma directly. That was really an eye-opener.
Yeah, and one of the indications of this is that, like you have told me in your experience and what I'm experiencing at the moment while purifying this meridian system, all kinds of weird physical symptoms are arising, and it's much more so than like prior to starting this specific purification of the meridian system. So I hardly ever used to have colds, or if I had them, it would last one day and that was it. But this like since the past 2 months, like since it really clicked, or I guess a little bit more than that, since it really clicked, this view, my experiential view of the meridian system, I've been sick a lot. I currently have this like this throat, infected throat, and it's just moving around, like, and then it goes down, and then it comes back, and it directly relates to the energies that are being released. and it's very interesting to see. And as you say, it seems like it runs way deeper than
Yeah,
I could have ever imagined.
yeah. Just an example of from my own uh, practice is that I started having migraines about 1 or 2 days a month. I started having migraines 11 or 12 years ago, and at first I didn't even know that they are migraines. I was just having these really killer headaches, and then I learned that they are migraines, and then I started trying, not eating sugar, not drinking coffee, not eating this or that, sleeping enough, exercising, all these things, and nothing worked, you know. And then last year, 11 years later, I saw directly how the trauma knot from my tailbone was what was causing my migraines, what was causing numbness of fingers in my right hand. And just like a month or two ago, I saw directly how that trauma knot is dislocating my joints. Because, I had to crack my chest bones. It kind of feels like I start to feel difficult to breathe, and there's kind of this nagging ache there, and so I have to crack the chest plates back together. And for years I've had to get my back cracked because there are these facet locks that get squeezed together and create this nagging ache in the back. So I've had to get it cracked, or I have to you know use two tennis balls tied together to crack it myself on the floor. But then I realized, like years later, when I've done this cracking, I thought that it's just age, it's just, some problem with the bones or ligaments or something. I saw that it's the traumatic energy of trauma, energy of that trauma knot that is affecting the spine and pulling it, affecting it in a way that it dislocates the joints, makes the fingers numb, gives headaches in the head. And I was blown away, like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, and
And
that's just my example. It can be so many different ailments and illnesses in other people's cases.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I've had similar, I guess a lot of people who know me know that I've gone quite far in trying various
yeah,
things, dietary, eating, like going as far as eating only raw meat,
yeah, yeah.
like walking barefoot around, like all because of this kind of desperation to try to fix certain physical ailments. And while I usually saw some improvement, it kind of never really healed. And I also, so I haven't verified this hypothesis fully because I still have those physical ailments, and
Mm,
it remains to be seen whether they will completely clear. But what I noticed was that because you spoke of your tailbone knot, my main knot is in the solar plexus area. So there's this kind of energetic contraction taking place here, and it has like tentacles or these like
yeah,
threads out to the whole stomach area. And it kind of just dawned on me in meditation that, oh, yeah, digestion, like tension in the gut. I think there is some, or I think there is some connection there. And I've noticed prior that this very same nervousness generated by this tension can lead to diarrhea. It can lead to all kinds of like
mm,
physical digestive symptoms. So
mm,
this is my experience too. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Something that I just remembered listening you talk is I was talking about the four Dantiens, And if you ask me how to cultivate the light body, how to reveal it through the use of Amrita Asana yoga or standing practices, is that you stand connected to the fourth Dantien. You stand in aligned posture with unified body, connected to these far ends of the Bhumi pillars. And then there, your body is built, the 9 pearls aligned, and then you start, like I'm just doing now, you start extending the frame, extending, expanding. Well, you put your physicalized intention into it, and it stretches, open, but it also contracts. This is what is used in Amrita Asana. You use muscles that extend and contract at the same time because you're tensing physically all these muscles at the same time. So you're already doing that in Amrita Asana. You're just doing it in a subtler way in standing. So connected with the pillars, and as you apply E, what happens you already mentioned this, what happens in the meridian field is that it is not only flushed with prana, it's like waves of prana flushing through it every time you expand the frame, but you're also stretching the meridians. So similarly, like when you do a bicep curl with a weight, well, assuming that there's a weight that you pull towards you, as well as extending it away from you, you're giving an exercise to the muscle that both contracts and expands it. Same when you do that in the meridians, it clears away the blockages there, thus revealing the original purity.
Which feels different from because that you made that point that there is it's very much described this flowing of prana in the system. That's what I usually come across when people describe standing meditation. But what I find happens when this meridian system is completely, stretched open, or is that it becomes completely non-dual then. Like it's
Yeah,
like it loses its location in the whole
yeah,
field is just this beautiful,
yeah,
perfectly vibrantly alive,
harmonious,
harmonious. Yeah,
completely grounded.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you can do all kinds of things then, and it's still like it's yeah.
And this leads nicely to, you mentioned the word cessation in this talk previously, and people on this podcast in the Mahasiddha interviews have talked about cessations of the mind. So this is a topic that has been written in detail in my books also. And cessation of the mind means that the selfing mechanism stops. It's momentary, but eventually it's lasting. This cessation stays. And by the way, what is meant by cessation, it is different in classical vehicle of Buddhism, Hinayana, and it's different, the definition is different in Mahayana. I'm a Mahayana guy, so but anyway, cessation means that the selfing mechanism in the mind goes out of existence, stops existing. And the same happens with meridians. There are momentary cessations of the meridian system. Momentary meaning can be minutes to hours to days. And the more you purify it, the more the meridian system rests in its natural state. And eventually, when all of the stuff is removed, the body also rests in cessation. because the meridian system rests seized. Like in the movie Big Lebowski, it says that the dude abides. It's kind of like that. It's called non-abiding nirvana in Mahayana. So in this kind of cessation, there is no place where one abides. So there is no place, no location, no state, which is why it's non-abiding nirvana. In Hinayana, they have different view of nirvana. But yeah, the meridian karma, meridian system also ceases into its natural basic state. And I mentioned Ammaji, hugging Saint Amma previously, who I've also written and talked about on a number of occasions. You know, Amma, I don't think people often really realize what she's doing when she is just sitting in front of those countless people who come to see her and hugging them one by one and continuing doing it for up to a full day, 24 hours at one stretch, without standing up, without drinking, without eating. I don't think people really understand. They just see this amazing being and get immense blessings from her that completely transforms them, momentarily at least. You know, they see a Ammachi who gives them these lovely hugs that changes their lives, but there in front of our eyes, she's actually displaying amazing siddhis.
Mm.
And this siddhi part is something interesting because, you know, if you just, you know, if you, when you hug one person after the other, you know, thousands of people over 24 hours, if normal people did that for an hour, hugging one person after the other, it would completely wreck that person's energy. So you would go insane, or at least get very stressful, extremely stressful after an hour of doing that. But it's her who is transforming the lives of others, unaffected by their samsaric karmic energy, blessing them and continuing that for a full day without eating, drinking, resting, lying down.
Yeah,
So
it's astonishing. I didn't recognize that, just the feat of it, like the how, as you say, the siddhi aspect. Like, could you say magical power, like magical? Not well, the kind of
that's an interesting thing because, you know, as you know, I've been very critical about siddhis. I've been very critical about those siddhis that are always talked about, but nobody ever sees them.
yeah.
So, but these siddhis I take seriously because I have also had experiences of I have never gone completely without food, or I haven't gone completely without sleep for extended periods of time, but I have experienced it. This started years ago when I didn't need to eat except like 20-30% of the usual amount. And similarly, I didn't need to sleep, but I was completely fresh, felt nourished, didn't feel the need to eat or sleep. And so this is directly related to what the body needs or what it requires. And in the case of somebody who's fully attained, has full light body attainment, like I'm sure Ammachi has, you can see the siddhi is there. You know, she doesn't. To me, she doesn't need to levitate. She doesn't need to materialize objects. or any of these things, because I can just sit there for 6 hours, 12 hours, or full 24 and see her do that.
While at the
Right?
same time getting tired for like you would get tired sitting there, and
Mm.
she's doing a lot more than that. And I'm specifically using the word like a magical power for
Yeah,
these
yeah,
things. That's the real magical powers are in those kind of more like humans can't do those things like
yeah,
that.
yeah. And this, in turn, what, how those siddhis come about is like this. So, a normal samsaric being who hasn't attained light body has to rely on physical nourishment, has to give the body rest, so sleep, and so on. Because the fuel that you're running on is limited to this body, is dictated by the needs of the body. But when your light body pops, whether it's a momentary cessation or permanent, we talked about separation, duality in the mind, and we talked about separation or duality with the body. So then you're no longer separate from in any way. Your body also rests in non-duality. Your body has become, your body embodies dharmakaya, right? So this means that all the vital energy that we have around us, prana, chi, ki, that's the fuel you're running on. And this is, of course, an exercise also that you like a yogic exercise that you learn how to absorb energy from surroundings. So it can be done as an exercise, but the more you purify your meridian system, it starts happening automatically. So there is a really notable shift how the system runs. And
Yeah,
in somebody like Amma, you can see this directly. She doesn't need to have a cup of tea and have a biscuit every hour to refuel her tanks, because she doesn't run out, because it's how do you say, cosmic prana, universal prana, something like this. It's a big engine that she runs, gets her fuel from, rather than the small body engine. And that's why she doesn't get tired. She
and
can hug 5,000 people today and hug another 5,000 tomorrow and keep doing it every day of the year.
yeah.
Oh,
And the subtle point is that also she doesn't have to uh, um, absorb it from
mm,
the like it just
yeah, yeah,
the feeling when it just pops, in my case temporarily, is that it's just self-sustained, like
yeah, yeah,
just self-sustained. You're not drawing prana from the environment.
yeah, yeah,
You are the environment. You're
yeah.
that one field.
And it's exactly the same, that the effortlessness of it. It's the same with mind that is empty.
Yeah, yeah,
That that recognition of the wisdom mind, recognition of the state of emptiness, doesn't need to be sustained. It is effortlessly there. All right, so this has been pretty extensive and thorough discussion about the light body, the ins and outs, the mechanisms, the energies, the laws of it. Is there anything you would like to add?
I think that we have covered it pretty extensively.
We've been talking for 3.5 hours
Yeah.
because we recorded two episodes today. So it's definitely a time for me to rest a little bit.
Yeah.
My light body is
You're
not.
not self-sustained yet in that.
Like I've been drinking like I don't know 2 or 3 liters during
Same.
having to go to the toilet, and yeah, still have a work a little bit to do. Dear listeners, I wish you the best. I send you my blessings. May all beings be free. May all beings rest in natural joy. And see you in next episode. Thank you for listening. Thanks for joining.